Breaking news here within the Cardano ecosystem. We've got some turmoil brewing between the three founding entities, to be specific, between the Cardano Foundation and IOG, and the Cardano Foundation and the general Cardano community. So as a part of today's video, I want to break down what a lot of the community has been talking about when it comes to the Cardano Foundation using their 100 million ADA allocation for voting when it comes to Project Catalyst. In addition to the fact that there seems to be some disdain, right, between IOG and the Cardano Foundation, in the fact that a whistleblower has now come forth with allegations about the intent of the Cardano Foundation itself. So without any further ado, let's jump on in. What's up, ADA gang? Welcome to Dapp Central, your home for everything blockchain and crypto. I'm your host here, Fareed. As a part of today's video, we've got some drama and some internal turmoil when it comes to the Cardano ecosystem. I want to go ahead and at least begin to address some of this. Now, I want to go ahead and just say this up front. We have not heard from a couple of the key entities mentioned as a part of some of these allegations, which are beginning to really rock the Cardano ecosystem. So if it's your first time stopping by the channel, my goal is to help you find your way around the growing ecosystem. If you appreciate content like this, please make sure to smash that thumbs up on the way in. If it's your first time stopping by and you want more content like this, breaking down everything going on in Cardano, consider subscribing to the channel. And last but not least, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please go ahead and leave those down below. Now we're diving straight on in here. There is so much to cover, but if you've missed it, the Cardano Foundation has been under fire, given the fact that there's been the release of some potential whistleblower emails, which again, I'm going to talk about that, but huge disclaimer here, right? None of this has been sort of responded to just yet. And a lot of this has not yet been confirmed. In addition, we've got the fact that the Cardano Foundation has now begun using a big portion of their ADA in order to vote for Project Catalyst funding round 13 proposals. Now, as you could imagine, they have quite a big amount of ADA that they're holding, and they're using that to vote. And there's been complaints about the fact that founding entities should not be able to do exactly what the Cardano Foundation is doing. Now, as a personal disclaimer, because I've worked with people from the Cardano Foundation, many of them I know and are good friends, this is by no means my personal take. This is just the information that we have out there. And I want to give the CF, and hopefully the CF does take the opportunity to actually respond to some of these allegations and to make sure that they can set the record straight. Because again, as we're going into the bull market, the last month has been extremely exciting for everybody within the Cardano ecosystem. And to have something as big as this happen, right? It doesn't look good, especially if you're looking from the outside in. Now, me as a content creator here, I know and I see the fact that there's always drama going on, but it's typically between projects, not the founding entity. So this is a little bit different. And what's crazy about this is that we've had Tamara Hassan, hopefully I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, who's president of, I want to say it's IOG, basically come out and be vocal about this in agreement with some of the whistleblower allegations. And very similarly, Charles Hoskinson also backing this up as well. So this is a little bit of a concerning topic, especially when you have some of the bigger figures who are actually speaking out and corroborating some of these things. But without any further ado, let's just first sort of set the stage here. If you've missed it, we have the fact that the Cardano Foundation's Twitter was recently compromised. Now, this was done on December 8th, where we got an unusual post from the CF mentioning that they're regretting to inform the greater Cardano community that they were served with some sort of lawsuit by the SEC. Now, many of you may or may not be aware, but Gary Gensler's on his way out. He was one of the bigger voices when it came to preventing altcoins from really thriving. So not only is that sort of happening, but in addition to that, we have the fact that a few months back, we had an official judgment stating that altcoins, including Cardano, Solana, and Polygon, were not deemed as securities by the SEC. So for anybody who's maybe already paying attention to the space, this would have seemed like a bit of odd news. Now, of course, it definitely was because their account was compromised. And so as of earlier today, they did make an official post breaking down the fact that they have now reestablished their access to their account. Now, again, everything is sort of back to normal here with regards to that, but that's not even what I'm about to get into, which is the whistleblower allegations and exactly what's been going on here between the CF, IOG, and Emergo. So scrolling down here, they do verify, and they've published here a signature and a pub key, confirming that like this most recent message stating that their account is back online is in fact from them and them alone. So now that we have that sort of as the base, next we're going to move over and talk a little bit about Catalyst. So for anybody who isn't aware, Catalyst is a funding mechanism here within the Cardano ecosystem, where some of the biggest and brightest minds can put out proposals, and us as ADA holders have the ability to actually vote for some of those. Now, IOG and Emergo have historically not used any of their Genesis ADA allocation in order to vote for any of these proposals. However, we've seen a break of trend when it comes to the Cardano Foundation. So this is coming in here from BigPay, basically stating that Catalyst is officially rigged, given the fact that the Cardano Foundation is now using their 180 million ADA in order to vote for a shortlisted amount of proposals, which essentially, because of the amount of ADA that they hold, means that those proposals basically just skip straight to the front of the line and automatically or basically by default be funded. Now, I'm not going to break all of these categories down, but what I do want to mention is the fact that they've at least been transparent enough to let us know how many proposals they've reviewed, how many proposals they're actually going to be voting on, and exactly how much of the allocation for each category of the Catalyst Fund their voted proposals will be impacting. So looking at the far right-hand side here, you can see that when it comes to the CF and who they voted for, they're basically going to be voting and consuming a lot of the allocated ADA for all of these categories. Now, because their amount of ADA is so big, it's highly likely that whoever they voted for will basically get the yes vote, meaning that they'll be able to secure Catalyst funding. So you can imagine that that's going to be a big conflict of interest. Now, if we take a look here again, another picture or another screenshot that BigPay posted, we've got different categories, and we can see that in this middle column here, a lot of the community, when they do show up, really only makes up around 150 million ADA. So if you do the math there, you know, the community alone contributing to around 150 million ADA being used to vote, and then you've got the foundation with over, 180 million. They basically have just as much power in that one entity compared to the majority of the community when they all come together and actually show up to vote. Now, this raises a completely separate issue, which I also want to tackle here while I've got your attention. And that's just the fact that Cardano has nearly, I want to say 36 or 37 billion ADA in circulation. Don't quote me on that. We have a hard cap of 45 billion. But out of that 35 plus billion ADA, we're only seeing 150 million ADA from the community, excluding the CF, actually coming in and actually being used to vote. So while yes, the CF voting with their ADA may not necessarily be what the community wants to see, keep in mind that we really don't have a lot of turnout when it comes to something like Catalyst. And in this last round, 50 million ADA was up for grabs. So if you take a look at that, I mean, Cardano's over $1. That's $50 million basically up for grabs. And we only have a small sliver, like less than 1% or maybe 1 or 2% of the total amount of ADA that's out there that's actually being used to vote for Project Catalyst. So I think we need to come together as a community and figure out what exactly is it that we can do in order to get more turnout and more participation within Project Catalyst. But again, that's sort of besides the point here. So after those two posts that came out from Pay, a lot of people, again, were just sort of wondering what is actually going on here with the CF. Now, Pay posted an additional post here, and this is where things sort of pick up. He has posted what is basically has now been dubbed as the Cardano Foundation whistleblower emails. Now, there is a massive disclaimer here breaking down the fact that like a lot of this could not be corroborated. And obviously you take this with a grain of salt because it's really sort of attacking and sort of pointing the finger at the Cardano Foundation. But it does also mention Emergo and Intersect, as well as IOG and Charles's contributions. Now, for the sake of time, I cannot read all of this here. I'll leave the link to it down below. As you guys can see, I mean, it's extremely long, but I'm going to do my best to quickly summarize and recap all the information that we have so far. So this particular whistleblower, again, has remained completely anonymous, shares their firsthand experiences being in the depths or being directly integrated at the CF. And they also share some of their concerns about governance, leadership, and just the internal politics taking place right now at the foundation and within the growing Cardano ecosystem. Now, their primary focus here in this particular whistleblower thread is basically, again, targeted at the CF with observations touching on IOG and Emergo alike. Now, when it comes to their observations about Emergo and some of the other entities, well, when it comes to IOG, they mentioned the fact that IOG has basically made significant contributions to Cardano's growth, despite some transparency and management flaws, which I know Charles has definitely mentioned and addressed before. I think the biggest takeaway here is that people were just not happy with the pace of development for Cardano, but I think that it's definitely more than worth it, given the fact that Cardano has been able to scale. Cardano still remains secure, and we've definitely got by far one of the biggest and strongest communities around. Now, next, the whistleblower focuses on Emergo, mentioning the fact that they've been historically slow to contribute to basically any of the initiatives within the ecosystem, but they have shown improvements over the last couple of years, if not months. If you haven't been paying attention, again, they've brought on Kinka Gold, they've brought on GSR, they've got partnerships with Zilliqa, doing a lot here when it comes to liquidity, market making, and just giving projects within the ecosystem an opportunity to be more visible to traditional platforms outside of the blockchain and Cardano ecosystem. So far there, they've sort of, again, touched on IOG and Emergo. And so far, again, a lot of that has been things that people are typically aware or that the community has sort of known already. Now, last here, before we jump into allegations about the CF in particular, we have the Intersect member-based organization. So this is essentially a way for anybody who's within the ecosystem to contribute to governance here on Cardano. And in the whistleblower email, they basically break down the fact that Intersect is still at a very, very early stage, which I totally agree. Again, Intersect was announced about a year ago. And the fact that they still have some concerns about the fact that bureaucracy and self-interest is creeping into the MBO-based system. Now, again, those are just sort of things that people have already talked about. Now let's get into the specifics about what they actually saw when it came to concerns about the Cardano Foundation. As always, guys, again, if you guys find this content to be helpful, because it does take time for me to sort of aggregate and research and put all this together for a single video, I would appreciate you if you could smash that thumbs up. If it's your first time stopping by the channel and you want more content just like this, please, again, consider subscribing to Dapp Central. And last but not least, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave those down below. Now, their first and biggest concern here is with leadership. They mentioned the fact that there's a lot of ego right now within the senior leadership at the Cardano Foundation, and the fact that internal politics are really beginning to hinder any and all of their progress. In addition, they mentioned the fact that the Cardano Foundation leadership is more or less focused on asserting control, right? As opposed to actually providing genuine ecosystem growth. Now, the next bit that they jump into is governance and participation, where they mentioned that the CF's involvement within governance, in particular, SIP number 1694, right, has been extremely minimal and very self-serving. In addition, it appears that their actions, especially at the very end here when they sort of called a couple of things out, were basically done in order to undermine IOG and Intersect, as well as the community's efforts. Now, if I actually jump back over here, I want to quickly share a tweet. I've had the pleasure of meeting Nicholas Cerny, who is the governance lead at the Cardano Foundation. It's clearly actually stated right there. He posted this tweet. This was on December 11th, so just 2 days ago, where he states, "I'm feeling let down by some people that I've looked up to. This isn't the Cardano ecosystem that I fell in love with. We need to put our egos aside and work together to push Cardano forward. There are real problems to solve, but instead, we're stuck in petty social media arguments." So again, it seems like even people working at the CF are speaking out about what is currently going on, which obviously isn't a good thing. But I'm going to also quickly highlight what Charles has mentioned, as well as Tamara about this entire situation. Now, the next thing I want to briefly highlight that the whistleblower email also touches on is Project Catalyst and the ADA delegation from the Cardano Foundation, where they mentioned the fact that the CF, of course, again, has used their 100 million ADA for voting in order to basically dominate who's going to win and who's going to lose within this particular round of Catalyst, which basically signals centralization. And then on top of that, the fact that their intention when it comes to holding ADA is to more or less influence the ecosystem, as opposed to doing what they think is in the community's best interest. Now, last but not least, within this particular whistleblower email, they talk about just the general performance of the CF, where they mention minimal tangible contributions to the ecosystem, as well as the fact that leadership appears to be more or less focused on maintaining control of the ecosystem as opposed to driving meaningful progress. So in closing, at the very end of the whistleblower email, they basically mentioned the fact that the CF leadership needs to focus on meaningful contributions. They need more transparency around their activity and exactly their intent, as well as the fact that Intersect and other organizations need to maintain accountability in order to ensure that the community's voices are heard. Last but not least, they mentioned the fact that the community should demand better leadership and alignment from the Cardano Foundation. Now, this is exactly what it's all about. Now, what I want to quickly do is shift back over to mention or to quickly highlight what Tamara had to say about the whistleblower allegations or email, where she states, I have to say that the fair amount stated within that particular email is in fact true from her perspective. And this is something that she's actually lived herself. Continue on to say, I've said this many times, that the governance structure within the CF is currently flawed, in that she was on the council at one point and she was trying to improve things, but it felt like the people that were there didn't truly care about Cardano. Now, one thing that's interesting about the CF and exactly how they operate is the fact that their board members are actually picked and funded, or I guess founded, out of Switzerland, right? And so I want to break down exactly why that's important and the fact that maybe we shouldn't be going down that particular route. Now, I want to close up and summarize here exactly what Tamara had to say, where she finished off by saying that apparently the Cardano Foundation board elections will be coming up this April, and that we as a community should definitely be keeping an eye out for that. Now, there's also some pieces here about the fact that, because of the fact that IOG and the foundation have not been seeing eye to eye, that's why we did not see representation from IOG at the recent Cardano summit, which I definitely found to be odd. And I know that there are rumors sort of swirling around about the fact that, Charles or IOG wanted, the CF to do more of the heavy lifting when it came to the event and just a lot of other things. But now seeing this through the allegations of this whistleblower email really puts a lot of this into a better perspective for me, at least. It seems like there's definitely been a falling out here between the three entities, or at least at minimum between the CF and IOG. And that's been very clear here with no representation from IOG at the recent Cardano summit. Now, again, even Tamara's post alone is extremely, extremely long, but I'll leave the link to it down below. But I do want to quickly highlight what Charles had to say himself too, where he states that, yes, this has been a long and a difficult road, but that he does also agree with the sentiments of the whistleblower. He basically says, I honestly have no idea if the CF will ever vote against the community, right, when it comes to the Constitution or the budget, but it's been extremely frustrating. And yes, he also mentions that Intersect should have actually been the CF. So right now we have the CF and Intersect as two separate entities, but he believes that they actually should have been one and the same. Now, again, he closed out by saying that the board members are not community elected or appointed, which I do think is a critical piece here, right? If we're going to have a board that basically represents the foundation and the foundation represents Cardano, we as ADA holders, just like we vote for Catalyst in the Constitutional Convention, right? We should also be voting for things such as the board of elected members that represent the Cardano Foundation. So he basically mentions that, and then in closing states the fact that there seems, or at least he believes that there seems to be a strong dislike for him personally from within the CF. So that's quite a bit to break down there. As we get ready to roll out here, I do want to quickly highlight a couple of more things that have popped up here. So we've got Rand, who's one of the key members contributing and putting on the Rare Evo event for 2024 and 2025, mentioning that the CF reached out to them earlier, basically trying to get them on board for a Project Catalyst proposal, where I assume the CF would have voted with their ADA for that particular proposal if the team from Rare Evo would have been willing to collaborate with them on some sort of additional event in the future. Again, there's just a lot of really long threads here, and for the sake of time, I just cannot go through all the details. But this basically breaks down some of his concerns in the fact that the CF didn't always deliver, right, when it came to their promises in times past. So he's now sort of pitching what is going to be called the Intersects Event Council that'll be managing all of the funds for Cardano-specific events, given the fact that there's been transparency issues about the budget and the costs associated with prior Cardano summits, where the CF wasn't openly giving us that information as a community. So we also have a poll that came in here from Rick McCracken as we get ready to wind things down, asking if we think that the Cardano Foundation board members should actually be elected by ADA holders. And let's actually just see the results here. We have 75% saying yes, 13% or 14% saying no, and then the remainder just wanting to see the actual results. So, I mean, looking at this, looking at what Charles has mentioned about the board not being elected by the community, and for me personally, knowing that everything else that we do in this ecosystem is done through votes, through the community, and by ADA holders, I also do believe that, yes, the Cardano Foundation board members should most likely be elected by the community. So if I jump over to the official website here, we've got some of the executives, which of course we got Fred, who's the CEO. We've got Andreas, who's the COO. We've got Jojo Zanetti, who I've hosted here on the channel, who's the CTO, and then Nicholas, who's the Chief Legal Officer. Now, if we jump over to the board members here, we've got the mention of Jillian McNabb, Mary, Andreas, and Fernando. And I believe that these are the folks that basically are on the board that were not necessarily voted in. Now, I've had the pleasure of actually meeting Andreas in person at the recent Cardano Summit. And of course, I want to just say this again, like, these are people that I've worked with, but I also understand sort of the state of Cardano right now and realize that a lot of people are very frustrated with what's going on here with the CF. And I want to give the CF an opportunity to also respond. So I think it's going to be very important that over the course of the next coming days that they put out an official statement, just like they did with their Twitter account being hacked, clearing the air about their intent and what they're willing to do to really hear the community out about the current state of Cardano and their intent moving forward about supporting Cardano and bringing Cardano to the masses. So as we get ready to close things out, I want to pose you, the community, a question here about how things are structured when it comes to the CF. So this is a post that was actually posted by Mark here asking, since decentralization is a key feature of Cardano, why is the CF board appointed by the Swiss government? The Swiss government, or any institution for that matter, does not have to serve the interest of Cardano or the community or the ecosystem, which again is a very, very great point and a great question to ask. So I want to ask you that, do you agree with how things are currently structured, how people are being able to, or how people are joining the board when it comes to the Cardano Foundation? And should this be a community-driven decision? In addition, should the CF be using their ADA? Should Emergo be using their ADA? Should IOG be using their ADA when it comes to Catalyst, when it comes to governance and voting, right, for things like the Cardano annual budget? Now, I know in times past, Charles Hoskinson has made it very clear he wants nothing to do with governance, and he also doesn't want IOG to have anything to do with voting and using their ADA from their Genesis allocation to contribute to the ecosystem. Basically, he believes that, it's better done by the community. And yes, there will be stumbling blocks. We will make mistakes, but it's better that we do it ourselves as opposed to them trying to continuously strong arm us, therefore never giving us the ability to actually grow and thrive on our own. So that will do it here for today's update. Again, I'm back and hopefully providing you guys with more content. If you found any portion of this particular video to be helpful, I would appreciate you if you could smash that thumbs up. If it's your first time stopping by Dapp Central and you want more content like this, breaking down everything going on in the ecosystem, consider subscribing. And last but not least, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave those down below. That said, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.